Zohran Mamdani makes a final push for votes in the closing days of the campaign to become the leader of America's largest city. In a few short months, this millennial candidate has been catapulted from an unknown member of the New York State Assembly to an international figure and the odds-on favourite to win one of the most high-profile jobs in US politics. He has promised to freeze prices for millions of renters in New York, make buses free, and offer public childcare. Basel-styled Democratic Socialist says he will fund his policies by implementing higher taxes on the rich. Critics say he is indulging in fantasy politics, and excessive taxes will force the city's wealthy residents to flee.
Yesterday, we gathered more than 10,000 New Yorkers as we spoke of a city that is not for sale. A city where New Yorkers could do more than just struggle to afford the most expensive city in the United States of America. A city government that understood its responsibility to those straining to buy groceries, not just those straining to buy an election.
The 34-year-old was born in Uganda and, if he wins, would be the first Muslim mayor of New York. He's also an outspoken supporter of the Palestinian cause. Mamdani's main rival is former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who resigned over accusations of sexual misconduct. The longtime Democratic grandee lost the nomination to Mamdani and has called the political newcomer dangerously unqualified.
Socialist sounds nice, utopia. Socialism hasn't worked anywhere. Venezuela had socialism, didn't work. Cuba was socialist, didn't work. Socialism is not going to work for New York City. Socialist name is Zohran Mamdani.
If Mamdani wins, he not only has to deliver for the people of New York, his success or failure in the job could decide if Democrats opt for a more liberal candidate to run in the next presidential race.
Let's bring in Galen Druke. He's the founder and host of the GD Politics podcast and joins us from New York. Welcome, Galen. Tell us a bit about the atmosphere on the streets of New York today. How are people feeling about this election?
Yeah, it's very lively. It certainly matters which neighborhood you're in. New York City is a city of 8.5 million people, and we have neighborhoods that encompass native-born Americans, immigrant neighborhoods. We have many different socioeconomic statuses, different races and ethnicities across the city, and many of those different neighborhoods vote very differently. And so it will very much depend where you are in New York City today, how it feels on the street. I'll say for my part, I'm in Brooklyn, which is pretty much Zohran Mamdani territory. And, of course, we had the New York City Marathon over the weekend, which was a big turnout event. We have early voting here in the city. And so it was a big turnout event for all of the candidates. And in particular, Zohran Mamdani, who's been trying to drive up the youth vote as much as possible, because according to some polls, he's winning folks under 50 by around 60+%, with about 60+%.
Mamdani is a self-styled Democratic Socialist, but Republicans such as Donald Trump have called him a communist. Is it really socialism in the traditional sense of the term he represents?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of debates about what Democratic Socialist means in the United States and in other countries as well. And so for example, a European audience, the things that he's promoting are not that foreign, right? Government-provided childcare, for example. I mean, things like government-run grocery stores are things that are pretty much not on Americans' radars. We have heard him talk less about that in the general election than in the primary. But folks like Bernie Sanders, who made democratic socialism come onto the scene in the United States, I wouldn't describe it as popular because of a majority of Americans have negative views about socialism and prefer capitalism. But within the Democratic Party, the concept of democratic socialism has been becoming more popular. And what it essentially means is government-funded programs with more generous funding than we see now, maybe even a single-payer healthcare program, which we don't have in the United States, and the likes.
Cuomo, we just heard him in the report, likened Zohran's plans of, democratic socialism to policies in Venezuela and in Cuba, and said it has never worked anywhere around the globe. Do you think, knowing what we know about what he's actually putting on the table, that his policies could work in New York?
I think it's likely that he will be able to get some of the policies he's proposed into being, into action, but many of them also no. I mean, there's a complicated situation in New York City, which is that a lot of the funding is still controlled by New York State, and New York State is not nearly as democratic, liberal, progressive, what have you, as New York City. And so he says he wants to raise taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers to increase their tax burden 2% of their income. And the governor of New York State, Kathy Hochul, has said, no, I'm not interested in doing that. He would also have to find new funding in order to make buses free, for example. Kathy Hochul, again, has said she's not interested in pursuing that. Now, are there certain areas on which the governor of New York and the next mayor of New York City will be able to come to some sort of compromise? I'm sure there will be, but it'll in part depend on what the margin is tonight. If Zohran Mamdani squeaks by with a victory, well, of course, if he loses, this is all for naught, this conversation, but if he squeaks by with a victory and it doesn't look like he ends up walking away with the kind of blowout victory that some of the polls have been suggesting earlier on, I think Democrats will approach him much more tentatively than if he wins in a blowout. And so whether or not he wins tonight is a big question, but the manner in which he wins is also a big question.
Yeah. This race has, of course, attracted not only national attention, with Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Barack Obama weighing in. We're talking about it on an international broadcaster. Is this bigger than just choosing New York's next mayor?
It is, and it isn't. I mean, it would be kind of silly to try to draw national conclusions about the Democratic Party or American politics from a mayoral race in a city where it's a Democrat versus a very high-profile independent versus a Republican. I don't think there are going to be any highly consequential races in the coming year or two that are going to feature the same dynamic, particularly amongst an electorate that votes for Democrats by, a 40 to 50 point margin. And so this election is sui generis. At the same time, no one's going to stop anyone from, trying to publish their hot takes or, claim that there are significant takeaways for the country, the Democratic Party, or what have you, based on this race. I mean, one thing I will say that's probably a lesson that folks can learn, regardless of where they are in the country or maybe even the world, is the campaign style of Zohran Mamdani. A lot of the things, especially the social policies that he supported, are not popular, maybe not even popular in New York City, like defunding the police and the like. Number one, he jettisoned some of those ideas in favor of running a campaign that was mostly focused on affordability. So, folks in more competitive elections, not in highly democratic places like New York, may take that lesson. But also the style in which he campaigned, right? There are a lot of people on the left of American politics today who are very angry and unhappy and upset. I mean, almost all of the videos and photographs that you saw of Zohran Mamdani, he was smiling and being engaging and being joyful. And so, I think some people have taken the current American political moment to mean we ought to be outraged 24/7. Folks like Zohran Mamdani have taken a different tack, and we will see how successful that tack is.
We will indeed. That was Galen Druke, founder and host of the GD Politics podcast, excuse me. Thank you so much for your insights tonight.
Thank you.